My name's Lonnie Gold. I'm originally Canadian, and I began working with Suggestopedia in 1978. My first contact with it goes back to a trip to Ottawa in Canada, where the Canadian government was using it especially to teach French to English-speaking civil servants. And then I began to get more familiar with it in Paris, thanks to a woman called Smilen Savov who brought it from Bulgaria to the West. It was an idea originally dreamed up by Dr. Eleko Novakov, and then popularized, developed, expanded, and promoted by Dr. Georgi Lozanov, who is actually very, very well known. Suggestopedia is a teaching method which makes it possible for people to learn 3 times as fast as they can under normal circumstances. It involves the creation of a very safe environment where students are extraordinarily stimulated. But they have to feel safe. People learn fastest when they allow themselves to be a little bit vulnerable, and so a suggestopedic teacher creates an environment where anything that's negative is banned from the environment, and where you get an awful lot of positive reinforcement through the use of suggestion. Suggestion is any information that comes to you beneath the level of your conscious perception. So that's what Suggestopedia is. In terms of how it works, I see there being 4 basic principles. The first is that students must never be afraid of making mistakes. Second is that every piece of information has to be linked to a positive emotion. The third one is that suggestopedic teachers work with peripheral perception. In other words, we orchestrate what students are going to see without actually realizing that they're seeing it. But this speeds up learning because everything is organized so that their memory hooks along the way. And fourthly, I think we always assimilate information before we analyze it. In terms of what it looks like, we usually use texts in the form of plays, and these are read to with classical music. Then there are a lot of games with the texts. We spend most of the time playing pedagogical games that the students can never forget because they're fun, they're stimulating, and they're surprising. We use surprise an awful lot so that there's never a dull moment. And we finish most of the lessons with the use of Baroque music, which is used to change the brain configurations and slow them down, because when a person is productive, the person is not necessarily receptive. We have to bring the brain rhythms down to between 8 and 12 hertz in order for people to actually take in information much more quickly. So basically it's about planning the different phases of learning and using different activities, different forms of music and so on in order to speed up the whole process. Fundamentally, it's about the relationship between the teacher and the students, and the quality of the exchanges between the students, because once an environment is completely safe, people become less guarded and they are no longer busy criticizing each other, and there's an atmosphere of mutual support, which means that people just let themselves go, take all of the information in, and just revel in the fact that they're taking in amazing amounts of information, and it's exciting. I think the important thing to remember is that when people experience fear, there are chemicals that are released in the brain, mostly adrenaline and cortisol, that stop the blood from getting up to the upper levels of the neocortex. And this is the major problem, not just in learning, but in life. When people are afraid, the brain shuts down and they're not open to taking in new information, developing new skills, or doing anything that they haven't got solid experience doing. And so in Suggestopedia we have to make people feel safe because that's the way they remain open. We also have to plan the distortions that are going to take place between one lesson and another. Normally the pupils sleep, and every time somebody sleeps there's a distortion that takes place because whether we know it or not, we dream. And dream is a distortion. That's what dreams are. They distort time and they distort space. And the teacher has to plan for how these distortions are going to impact on what it is that he's teaching or she's teaching. I think the metaphor that I like the best is that of a potter who makes beautiful pots, but before they go into the oven, they just look as if they're boring brown, and it's only after they come out of the oven 24 hours later that we actually have all of the beautiful colors that are going to delight us, because that is the finished product. That's the plate, that's the cup, that's whatever it is. And so the teacher has to know an awful lot about how the students' minds are going to work and feed in the information so that after the distortions we end up the inevitable physiological distortions that are just part of the way we live, the way we're built, so that the information comes out right. I think it's most commonly used in foreign language learning and primary level. I think it could be used for a lot of other subjects, but we would need specialists in those fields to take the philosophy behind Suggestopedia and work with the subject matter that they know well. I unfortunately am not a scientist, I'm not a maths teacher, and so I'm not able to actually develop any of these disciplines because I'm not very good at them actually. But if there were a science teacher or a maths teacher who was highly motivated to move ahead in that direction, it would certainly be possible to put together some of the most amazing programs. I think the qualities that are needed in a suggestopedic teacher are very different from the qualities needed in a traditional, old-fashioned teacher. Traditional old-fashioned teachers are always focused on what they know, and they try and transfer what they know to students. A suggestopedic teacher isn't really so much an expert in their field as an expert in communication. They have to know how to motivate the students, they have to know how to give positive reinforcement, and basically to show at every second of every class to every student how amazing they are. They have to get the students to surprise themselves. They have to get the students to do things that they've never done before with the rest of the class as witnesses, because it's quite common that people will do extraordinary things and the next day they say, no, it wasn't so extraordinary. What we need is 10 or 12 other people shouting at them saying, yes, what you did yesterday was extraordinary. So we're basically getting people to redefine who they are because they're redefining what they're capable of. The main thing is to keep people totally surprised by how much more they were able to do than what they thought they could do. And for that, we need very exceptional teachers. Teachers who are not afraid of taking risks. Teachers who are not control freaks, but who can surf with the movement in a class, maintaining control, obviously, but through their personal prestige, their qualities, and the confidence that the students have in them. When students come to class, the ideal thing is for them to be sitting there saying, I wonder what exciting things are going to happen today. So what we need are teachers who are not afraid of not knowing. In other words, if a teacher just doesn't have the answer to something, that's not a problem. The teacher can tell the students, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll tell you tomorrow. And that creates a kind of complicity, a kind of group feeling where the teacher is an integral part of the group. He isn't of the group, but he's in the group, and he's working on several levels at the same time. I say he because I'm a man, but in actual fact we have many more women suggestopedic teachers than men suggestopedic teachers. Very interesting. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was sunbathing on a tropical island next to Madagascar when I got a phone call from somebody in Bulgaria who asked me if I could come and run a course here. And I said yes, and we decided to do it as a joint venture. She would get Bulgarian people to come to the course, and I would bring a number of French people because I was working mostly in France at that time. And we did this course, I think it must have been in January 2013, I think. And amongst the Bulgarian students, I had Teodora Neneva, who came with 4 or 5 of the BSS staff. And yeah, and then after that she said, well, I've got a lot of other teachers. I'd really like to introduce this to our school. And she had me come back, if I remember correctly, around July 2013. And after that we began running regular teacher training sessions in order for the school to develop greater flexibility and greater psychological sensitivity and greater creativity as well in all of the classes that are going on. So that's basically how it started, and I come back quite regularly. What we're focused on is, of course, the suggestopedic method, but mainly and above all, the quality of the relationship between the teacher and the students, and the way in which a teacher can really elevate the level of exchanges between students. It's got to be a very, very safe environment. When Dr. Lozanoff decided to call it Suggestopedia, he called it Suggestopedia because he defined suggestion as all of the micro messages that come to a person when you aren't paying attention. And it's the micro messages that make us feel safe and open, or else closed and defensive. And what we want here at the British School in Sofia is a great openness on the part of the students to each other, to the teachers, and to the subject matter that they're learning. I think Suggestopedia and the role that it plays in BSS is extraordinarily important, because in a society where we are giving up more and more control of our lives, where through Facebook and other social networks, almost everybody knows everything about us, where we're kind of pinned down to fulfilling other people's expectations of who we are and how we're supposed to behave, and how we must conform to the different groups that we're in. The last frontier of freedom is inside our own unconscious minds, where our creativity is based, where our dreams manifest, and where we can really rewrite the scenario of our lives the way we want to be. And so I think that it's only by developing our perception of who we are and what we're capable of that we'll be able to realize who we really can be, and sort out for ourselves the kinds of lives that we really want to lead. I see this, and Dr. Lozanoff was very much in agreement with this. In fact, that's one of the things I liked the most about him, because I knew him quite well. His whole adventure with new learning systems was about giving yourselves what you needed in order to have the freedom that you needed in order to live a very, very happy life.